Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Forgotten Generation podcast, hosted by Troy Njenje Mbanga. This podcast is about amplifying young people's voices and the journeys they're on. Welcome back to another episode of Thursday Thoughts. Today, I am joined by a mental health advocate, Luca. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Hi, everybody. Well, for starters, thank you for Troy for having me on, most importantly. My name is Luca. I'm a small social media creator. I post videos regarding mental health and my own progress, my own journey. And I'm currently 21 years of age. I'm living in the region of Hertfordshire. I'm a barista for a full-time job, but at the same time, trying to push out content, trying to push out social media to get the message across to people that your mental health is important too.
Absolutely, and it's so good to have you on today's episode. What is your mental health journey?
It's a good question. My mental health journey, it's been a very interesting journey. It's been going on for a good few years. I remember when I sort of finished secondary school, I was feeling very distant from myself. I didn't feel fantastic. Something wasn't right and I could never work out what it truly was. And as years and years progressed, I got to about maybe 19 and 20 and I felt the lowest that I've pretty much ever felt in my life. It was just thoughts of doubt, negativity, and things swirling in my head that wasn't the right mindset for myself. So I made changes along the way. You know, this journey that I've been on has been a very interesting one, as we'll talk about more. But my story begins with just a young man like myself who struggled with mental health and now wants to make a difference in people's lives. And my journey, again, like I said, I can't emphasize, it's been a very funny one. It's kind of like a roller coaster, really. You get up and down, you know. But as the current moment of time, I find myself being a lot happier, a lot more positive, and in a much better place than I was at the end of last year. Because that's when, for myself personally, my mental health was at the worst. And I look back at it now, and I just look back at it and smile because of how far I've come from there to now, most importantly.
What a journey. Like, you've come a long way and you should be so proud of yourself.
And thank you.
Who inspired you to make a difference in mental health? Who made you think, actually, I need to speak up about it?
There's a lot of people I could choose. I could write you a big list. I mean, Troy, for instance, you're one of these people that I look at and think, wow, what you're doing is fantastic. You see a lot of videos online, a lot of videos of lots of different people talking about mental health. I think the problem, you know, when you look at an inspiration as someone is if you really are inspired by them, you seem to find a trend of following people like that. And sometimes that's fine, but then sometimes it's not the right thing to do. I'm always open-minded, so I might take a bit of advice from 1, 2, 3, 4 people, but the main people in my life that inspired me, one of them is my family, because I don't want my family to see that version of myself, who I was a few years ago. Even at the end of last year, it wasn't the nicest version of myself. People that inspired me as well are other social media content creators. I've had friends that I've met along this journey who do sort of similar kind of stuff, like all about the mental side of things, all about, you know, the inspiring people to do better, do well in their fitness and stuff, you know. One of my best friends, he started TikTok as well, and he's absolutely smashing it. And people like that inspire me as well as my family. But most importantly, one of the main people who inspired me was my science teacher. I opened up to him when I was 16. I felt vulnerable and I opened up about my mental health. And he was the one that told me to talk about it, maybe seek professional help, even talk to some of the teachers about it in school about it, my friends. Just be open and honest about it. And ever since that, his name was Mr. Baker. I couldn't thank the man enough because he was the one that actually really kind of pushed me to talk and to overcome my fear of being scared not to talk about my feelings. So out of a group of collected people, there's so many that I hold dearly in my heart that I could be thankful for.
Wow, I'm absolutely speechless on what you said. Just so remarkable. What does well-being mean to you?
Well-being. That's a good question, actually. I find well-being means to me, like, you know, what do I do to look after myself? Is a question that I tend to ask myself a lot. You know, my well-being is very important, and I try and do as many things as I can. You know, I do a lot of sports activity-based things, like I play football sociably rather than competitively. As some people may know if they follow me on my lives and stuff, I'm openly talking about boxing. I'm an amateur boxer, new to the sport when it comes to competitive side, but just having that training, it's allowed me to, well, my welfare and my well-being, everything. Such a crazy sport, which can be dangerous. I do understand the negatives and sides of, you know, these combat sports. You haven't even got to compete. You can just train. And the training for me has done so much for me. This is another one I'm also inspired by my trainers and stuff, you know, linking back to the previous question. It's just that the physical side of the sport is demanding, but It allows me to stay fit, track my progress, and also make sure that my mind is also focusing on something. I think that's really important, you know. If you want to allow yourself to get better, your well-being and all this stuff, you know, put your mind to something. And my well-being and everything is me getting better, like physically, and, you know, I'm quite a lean guy as it is, you know. I'm not, you know, the biggest, buffest person in the world, but definitely physical side of things, like activities and going for a lot of running. I do a lot of running, you know, that definitely helps my well-being. And most importantly, socializing. I used to be stuck at home. No one forced me to. I did it on my own behalf. I was just sitting in bed, my own thoughts, again, feeling low. And being able to get up and go out now and socialize with my family, even a couple of my friends, that means absolute well to me, because I didn't have that last year. I had my family, had my friends there, but I didn't have as tight of a bond as I do now. And it's crazy to think that this time last year, Luca was just laying in bed, hoping the days would just go by quick to feel better the next day. And now I'm asking people, what are we doing today? You know, so just different activities, fitness-based ones, sports-based ones, and socializing is so important for young people nowadays, you know. When it comes to everything, I think socializing is so important.
That is so true. And socializing is important, you know, to connect and build bonds. Go out, go for a walk and a run, like you said, and just, I think it's incredible. There's so many things that young people can do. Maybe do some art and maybe do yoga. There's just so many things that you can do. What is one positive in your mental health and also one negative that you face?
Question. I like that one. It's a really good question. One positive that's challenged. One positive I like about mental health is that I think slowly, for instance, I'm going to use my situation here. As a young man, you know, there's a lot of criticism towards young males when they openly talk about their feelings. The thing is, when it comes to mental health, it is a bit of a sensitive topic for some people, because some people don't like to talk about their feelings, and that's completely okay. I've always said it's okay not to be okay. That's like my motto I always stand by. But one of the positive things I find is that when people like myself, a young man, start to talk about their feelings, open up about their mental health, that feeling, that positive feeling you have, it's like a weight off your shoulder. Yeah, that's what I would say. Having that weight off your shoulder is such a beautiful feeling. Having to sort of like released something that's been trapped inside of you. So when it comes to the positive one out of the question, I would always say having that weight off your shoulders. I mean, there's many positives you could choose. There's many. Like I said, it could be the fact of the physical side to the previous question, how fit I feel, how young, and I'm just enjoying the youth of my body. That makes no sense, but it does. And there's many things you could choose, but to me personally, having that weight off my shoulders is absolutely phenomenal. And a lot of people will understand that feeling. And maybe they haven't thought about it before, but once it's out of you, it's such a breath of fresh air. And I mean, the negative one, this is a good one as well. I mean, all your questions are good, so I know I keep saying it after everyone. But personally, like I said, I'm going to use my own experience with the age and being a young man. The stigma of young people having mental health, young men, even young women too, you know, in today's society, it seemed to be slightly more normalized compared to maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 years ago. Which I can understand. You know, social media's come into play. Social media's really changed the scene for a lot of young people. Obviously, I know the government are now trying to put, you know, different laws in place for under 16s and social media, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. But again, it all depends on your opinions, which is fine. But I think the stigma of the youth of today and pretty much being told that your feelings are irrelevant, you need to just kind of man up and crack on with things, because back in our day we didn't have all this. It's a different time, and I know that people have, you know, moved on, but we're still slightly stuck in the past, I think. And, you know, not to get into numbers and statistics and stuff, but I made a TikTok previously where I spoke about percentages among, you know, young people. Within like 1 in 5 people have this problem, and extreme serious things as well, you know. And even when it comes to like suicide, all those kind of really horrible, sad things, the statistics and numbers are horrible. And this is also built up from the fact of this stigma. It needs to just be abolished. It needs to just be thrown out the window, this word, because there's no such thing as a stigma. Everyone's feelings are important. Everyone matters. And as a society, I think we need to now move on and be in the modern generation of, even if you are a little bit sensitive, even if you are a little bit, maybe just even emotionally, a lot, that's fine. Everyone is different, and at the end of the day, we only get one shot on this planet. And while we're here, let's not be scared to talk about our feelings, most importantly. Let's help one another, and let's, build from these relationships we can make. So my answer to your question with the negative one is that stigma, and personally, it needs to be abolished.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And just what you said is so important. And I think it's so important actually that we do talk about mental health and talk about our feelings, as instead of actually embossing it all in and making it worse for ourselves. And it's okay to actually and speak up to maybe a trusted adult, maybe a friend, like a family member. Because if we don't, then it's going to make things worse. So, what are issues then in mental health that you think needs to change and for young people and for society? What would you want and the decision makers to do better?
I think there's a lot of things people can be doing better. One of the most important ones is, again, just being generally open and honest with people and not judging. People judge too easily. And I wish, that for young people in today's society, I think there should be more things spoken about in schools. I mean, there is plenty of, access for helplines out there, and people, I hope they do know that. And obviously there could be more, personally, because let's take the NHS as a great example. The NHS is fantastic, and what they do is absolutely amazing, and everyone that lives in, the United Kingdom can be so grateful for the NHS. But I think I hear a lot of stories from the backlog of, like mental health appointments and stuff as an example. We're not talking about, other appointments and stuff with the whole backlog going on, but just regarding with the mental health side of things, I hear there's a lot of waiting time to talk to someone, and I completely understand why. Like I said, because now slightly we're moving into the new modern generation with people actually embracing their emotions more and talking about them. Of course, there's going to be a bit of a delay sometimes. It's just common sense. But the issues I find in stuff, I just think people need to talk about it more in schools. Like when I was in school, if I'm honest, I think there's lessons called like PSHE and all these kind of other stuff that don't really talk about life things. I didn't get taught about taxes in school. I didn't get taught about X, Y, and Z mortgages and rent even. I just got taught about the basic fundamentals of school, really. Not really anything to take away, look back and go now and go, wow, okay. But just like an hour lesson once every week. Just allow people to broaden their minds on this topic. Because sometimes you can call it an issue, but sometimes issue maybe isn't the right word to use, Most importantly, just allow it to flow like normal. Allow it to be like a normal class, like a maths class, Just let it flow. Have questions. Have people ask questions. One of the issues is, I think definitely, the government needs to potentially look forward into allowing more funding into schools when it comes to this particular topic.
Thanks so much for saying about that. It's so important, and I do hope listeners took away on what you said. And so, what was the challenges for you with your own mental health?
So, with me, I don't exactly know how this all even began. One of the challenges I faced from such a young age was having just like in your brain, I couldn't pinpoint an exact issue on what it was. What exactly built up in my mind to the point that made me feel like I did. And the issues that I faced, again, it was just a lack of motivation, constant overthinking, and even my anxiety started to spike. And I've never normally been an anxious kind of guy. I mean, if you look at me now, I'm a social butterfly. I will talk to you, I would talk to the random person in the street, I would talk to the man cutting my hair, I'll talk to anyone. And that's why I'm happy with who I am, which is the most important thing, I think. But from such a young age, I did have a lot of bumps along the way. I was in a few relationships and stuff, and it didn't really go best of the well. It wasn't just a one-sided thing, it was kind of like a both-sided thing. So that obviously wasn't handy and helpful at the time. When you're trying to grow as a person and, you've got something else in your life causing you stress, it doesn't help. And even from the young age, I went to college for about 6 or 7 months, and I dropped out because I couldn't carry on. I didn't feel okay, and this is me back to hiding my emotions and giving up. I'm a big music fan. I love music, just like we all love music. I'm a bit of a singer myself. That's kind of a hobby of mine, and I went to college to study music industry. And unfortunately, again, I decided to drop out and I decided to quit because it all built up and I didn't know what else to do. So I took the easy option. Like I said, I felt just demotivated and just not in a good health space. So my issues I faced was such a young age. I think my anxiety just with going out in public places, socialising with people and all these other bits and pieces, it just got too much for me. And that's when I got into the comfort of being in my bed all day with the covers over my head in the dark with the blinds shut. Even my jobs from such a young age, I've had steady income from my jobs. Not that it's been fantastic, but for my age and the position I'm in, it was okay. A lot of stress from such a young age with a load of rubbish, really. I mean, I could tell you stories for days about when I was a restaurant manager, but it's not about that. But the stories, they all accumulate into, wow, you had to deal with that by yourself. And that definitely didn't help. And I think it got to my last job where I worked in a cafe. And I think the end of last year where it all just kind of peaked and I had enough. I needed to leave my relationship at the time. Not that it was a bad thing. It was just I needed to focus on myself. I had to make the selfish choice, which people have to do sometimes. It could lead to sadness. It could mean happiness. Sometimes it's got to be done. So I left my relationship. I focused on myself. And I also changed my job because the job that I was in was causing me so much stress and everything I had going on. I even went to the doctor to talk about something, and they registered my heart for an ECG scan, which I'm not exactly sure what it is. I think they monitor your heart for like a few minutes. They notice if anything's wrong, and they said I was healthy. I thought, that's great, you know? A no call from the doctors is a good thing sometimes, you know? And I was talking to the doctor, and he said, you sound very stressed for a very young man. And I said, oh, well, I don't know, I guess this is my story, X, Y, and Z. And he said, I think it's down to stress. And my doctor told me I need to make a change. So the issues that I had, it was across everything in my life, from my work to my relationship status to even my day-to-day life, getting stressed about getting on the bus because of my anxiety, you know, all these little things, it built up into one. And I think that was building up ever since I was that boy who quit college. Everything built up and it was just trapped in my mind. And I think we all get a bit like it sometimes. You get a little bit frustrated and we want to just release all of our anger. But I could never seem to find a way to release my anger, my emotions, and do you know what? Even cry. I could never find a way to cry. And I think crying's fantastic. Well, it's not fantastic, but it's good. It has so many benefits because you're, you know, releasing that pain, that sadness. And that's another thing I say too, you know. People can cry, men can cry. It's important to cry. But with the answer to the question, with the issues and stuff that I faced with my journey, my story, I never could find the release. I could never find that button to push it and let everything go because I was too scared to say anything to anybody. If you upset me, I wouldn't even tell you because I was too scared. But now, if you upset me, I will just turn around and walk away because I'm not going to allow myself to be amongst this doubtful negativity and whatever exactly it is. So that's my issues that I faced. It affect my day-to-day life and I'm glad I've got it under control now.
I'm glad you do as well. And it was so powerful what you said. I think, honestly, there's a lot of things that needs to be done better in mental health prepared for adults. I think it needs to be taught in PSHE a bit more. And it's not been talked about. And I think the government and people like teachers, head teachers, and also parents need to really help those young people and to just teach young people and in general about all these things, as it's really hard.
Definitely.
I just thank you so much for sharing about your adult empowering story.
Thank you very much.
And so what is one advice you would give to a young person who's very much interested in advocating for mental health and wants to make a difference but don't know how to?
I think one of my favourite sentences that I've thought about recently is just be real. You haven't got to be perfect, you know. When it comes to talking about things, I'm not perfect. You know, you could probably find someone out there who's better talking than me, you know, flows easier and just overall know about this topic than I do, and that's completely fine. You know, there are a lot of people out there who know more, and that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. And that also is inspiring for someone like myself, you know. So definitely just be real and don't try and be perfect. But for someone who's like interested in, you know, looking to speak about mental health and all this kind of stuff, just go for it. No one's stopping you. TikTok is a great platform, I find, to allow people to try these things. I had a previous account, which I don't know if you saw, but it got taken down by TikTok. I used to do a lot of live videos and I used to get a lot of restrictions and things. But anyway, that's not the point of my answer. The point is, I started TikTok, and unfortunately, due to things, it got taken down. But that page I first made, if you look at the videos I had then to now, it's a crazy difference. I was a scared boy sitting in my room like this, talking about, I feel like I have an addiction to alcohol, I feel like I have addiction to just what X, Y, and Z, and feeling low and vulnerable, etc. Now, I'm on a podcast talking about it. Like, that's a huge step for me. And again, well, I'll say my thanks at the end. But this is a big jump for me. And I'm glad I've been given this opportunity. I'm glad I've taken it, most importantly. But just for people that are looking to make a difference in today's world, I always say in my live videos, I don't want gifts. I don't want followers. I don't, you know, what people do for me on my TikTok lives are fantastic and I'm grateful. You know, the single rose is a fantastic thing for me. I'm so grateful. People sit there, tap the screen, tap, tap, tap to get me likes, to get more engagement. That's fantastic. People comment on my posts, people share my videos, like, thank you. But the one thing I want people to take away is the sentences I say, the real side of me. Like, it's okay not to be okay. People may think of that, I mean, that doesn't make any sense, but It does. You know, if you're feeling low, it's okay because you're not alone. A lot of people are. The more we talk about it, the more, it will be okay. I could tell you so many quotes, Troy, that I know from TikTok that I try and tell people to talk about, especially young people. We could go as deep as saying, take a day, take a week, take a month, take a year, just don't take your life. It's so extreme ones. And these are the things I promote on TikTok. These quotes, my energy I give to people, they say, oh, you're so energetic and everything. It's like, yeah, because you guys have, fueled me with this engagement. It's only a small engagement. 200 views isn't a lot of views on TikTok compared to these big content creators with thousands and millions of views. But that's enough for me. It's never been about the views. It's always been just to spread the message to young people like myself who want to make a difference, who want to talk about mental health, that just do it. There's nothing wrong with it at all. People will judge you, people will clown on you, people will hate on you. So what? I'm not going to obviously say particular words, but just forget about them, Screw those people, Get them out of your life. They're horrible people. But we're going to get hate no matter what we do in anything in life. Cleaning a floor at your job might always not be perfect. You might have missed a bit of dust in the corner. Just got to carry on with things. So my message to people who always want to start mental health, always want to talk about things, go for it. Like I said, be real. Don't fake. Don't pretend to be someone you're not. Just be yourself, like I am. Be yourself. Don't be scared to talk about things and just go for it. Because at the end of the day, we need people to do it.
Exactly. I love your advice, and I hope listeners took away what you said because it's so powerful. And to finish this episode, what is one word and to sum up your mental health journey?
Wow, one word. That's a really good question. Really good one. I could choose many, but I've got to choose one. I would like to say my word to describe my mental health journey, one word and one word only, would be resilience. Resilience is my word of my choice.
Absolutely. So incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just thank
you
you so much for coming on today's Thursday Thoughts episode talking about mental health, as it was really important conversation about it.
Thank you very much for having me, most importantly, and I hope someone can watch this and hopefully feel a little bit inspired to talk about it, most importantly.
Absolutely. And for listeners who have been affected about this conversation that we've had today, I will link some helplines in the description of this episode. Thanks for listening to the podcast episode. This is a Beaver Change Media Network production. Please support the podcast by subscribing and rating the podcast. I'd love to hear what you like and what could be better for future episodes. If you want to find me, you can find me on Instagram and iwill.troy, and also on X, iwill_Troy. Tune in to next week's episode.